Imagine standing in a room full of your ancestors, but instead of shaking hands, you are all busy wagging your tails. It sounds like a scene from a strange fever dream, but for millions of years, a tail was a standard part of the human hardware package. Then, one day, it just stopped showing up. Evolution is rarely a clean break. It is a slow, messy process of losing things we no longer need. To understand when and why we ditched the tail, we have to travel back about 25 million years. We are currently in the Miocene epoch. The world is getting warmer. Dense forests are thinning out into grasslands. Our primate ancestors, the early hominoids, are hanging out in the trees. They have tails. These tails are vital tools for balance and navigation. But then, a massive shift occurs in their anatomy. Look at the fossil record. Specifically, look at a genus called proconsul. These creatures lived in Africa during the early Miocene. They represent a pivotal moment in our history. Proconsul had no tail. When you lose a tail, your entire body plan has to change. You cannot simply lop off a limb and expect to stay upright. Without a tail for balance, the center of gravity shifts. These apes had to develop a different way to move. They began to rely on vertical climbing and hanging, rather than running along the tops of branches. This shift laid the biological foundation for upright walking. But why ditch the tail entirely? It comes down to a simple trade-off. Energy. Growing a tail is expensive. It requires bone, muscle, nerves, and skin. If you are an ape moving from the canopy to the ground, or even just moving differently through the trees, that tail becomes dead weight. It is an energy sink that provides zero return on investment. Natural selection is brutal. If a trait costs energy and offers no survival advantage, it will eventually be pruned away. Scientists have spent decades trying to pinpoint the specific genetic switch that made this happen. In 2024, a team at NYU Langone Health made a massive breakthrough. They identified a specific piece of jumping DNA, called an ALU element. This tiny sequence of genetic code inserted itself into a gene called TBXT. This is the gene responsible for tail development in vertebrates. When this specific piece of code lands in the middle of that gene, it acts like a biological typo. It tells the body to stop building the tail during embryonic development. This wasn't a slow, multi-million-year crawl where tails just got shorter and shorter. It was a genetic glitch that effectively switched the tail off. We know this because of the coccyx. That is your tailbone. It sits at the base of your spine. It is not just a random nub of bone. It is the architectural remnant of that lost appendage. If you look at a human embryo about 4 weeks after conception, you can actually see a distinct tail bud. It contains about 10 to 12 vertebrae. By the 8th week, it is gone. It is absorbed by the body. What remains is a fused structure of 3 to 5 vertebrae that we call the coccyx. It is a haunting physical echo of our deep past. This genetic mutation likely happened in a single individual. That individual survived, thrived, and passed the gene on. Because they didn't have to spend energy growing a tail, they were perhaps slightly more efficient at foraging, climbing, or escaping predators. Over time, that version of the gene became the standard for our lineage. This transition wasn't just about losing a piece of bone. It was the price of admission for becoming human. By losing the tail, our ancestors were forced to adapt their hips, their pelvises, and their lower spines. These changes were the necessary precursors to bipedalism. If we still had tails, we would likely walk with a permanent hunch, or perhaps we would never have stood up at all. We would be stuck in the trees, balancing on branches, forever tethered to the canopy. But there is a catch. Evolution does not always get things perfect. The coccyx is an example of what biologists call an exaptation. It is a part of the body that was originally used for one thing, a tail, that has been repurposed for something else. Today, your coccyx serves as an anchor point for various muscles, tendons, and ligaments. It helps support your pelvic floor and stabilizes you while you sit. It is a vital piece of engineering, but it is built on the ruins of a structure that once swung behind us in the wind. Think about the sheer scale of this change. Millions of years of tail-swinging existence, erased by a single insertion of jumping DNA. It reminds us that we are not finished products. We are works in progress, shaped by millions of years of genetic accidents and survival stakes. Consider the vestigial structures that remain. The wisdom teeth we don't have room for. The appendix that used to help us digest raw foliage. The goosebumps we get when we are cold, a relic from when we had thick fur to trap heat. We are walking museums of evolutionary history. We often think of ourselves as separate from the animal kingdom, as if we arrived on this planet fully formed and distinct. But we carry the blueprints of our ancestors in every cell. We are the result of billions of years of trial and error. The tail didn't just disappear. It became the foundation upon which we built the rest of our bodies. It allowed us to stand, to walk, and eventually to look up at the stars. So, next time you sit down in a chair and feel that base of your spine pressing against the seat, remember that you are sitting on the ghost of your past. That little bone is the reason you are standing here today. It is the silent record of the moment we stopped being apes and started becoming something else. And if evolution continues to pull those strings, who knows what else we might lose in the next million years? We are not static. We are a process. And the story of the tail is just one chapter in a much longer, stranger book. Are we moving toward a better version of ourselves, or are we just losing the tools that kept us connected to the wild? Perhaps the tail was never meant to stay. Perhaps, to gain the future, we always have to leave a piece of the past behind.